Alright, you want to get together tonight and study for our chemistry test?
Totally.
My place?
Will your mom be there?
Yeah.
Let's study at my place.
Good call.
Later.
That fast, Chuckle Nut!
Secondary school. One of the most important parts of our adolescence confined into a weird old building. And useless information would be crammed into the minds of hormonal teenagers. And because it's exam season, I thought I'd just make a video on this subject. And it's been a while since I've been in secondary education. That being 4 years. And somehow during that time, I still haven't managed to get my shit together. But I'm here now, talking to you about a past life that 90% of us probably regret. Also, I'm going to be talking about the UK side of secondary school, not the American side. This is obviously due to the fact that I've never been in an American school. So to any Americans watching this for whatever reason, just a quick heads up, UK schools are nothing like Harry Potter. So if you do want to be the one to try and make off that comparison, let me remind you, this is practically what American schools are like. Oh, Billy, I can't believe you'd have the nerve to ask Megan, the hottest girl in school, to prom over me, Chad, the captain of the football team. Now give me your lunch money, dork. You're such a loser. I deeply apologize if that was shit. That was my first ever Wojak animation. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Let's dive into the absolute hellscape that is British secondary schools. So usually sessions would start at like 8:30 in the morning and usually it ends somewhere around 3:30. We also had to go through the eternal struggle that was wearing a uniform. I still don't know why to this day it is mandatory to have a uniform for school. If you ask me, I think it's just the government's way of saying to these kids, guess what? This is what you're going to be wearing for the rest of your lives. Enjoy being corporate slaves in suits and ties, losers. And the teachers would make such a big deal out of even the most minuscule of things. They would inspect your uniforms as if you were in the military. You'd get in trouble if you had a stain on your shirt, if you were wearing the wrong shoes, if your shorts or skirt was too high or too short, if you were wearing your tie inappropriately. And they do it for the sole purpose of saying we need to look smart and respectful. Like, who are we trying to impress here? Is it the exact same people we see every single day here, or is it just the crackheads down the road? I think the only plus side of having to actually wear a uniform is the fact that you wouldn't have to wash any other clothes that you'd come to school with. But at the end of the day, I wasn't the one doing the washing. You think I had time to learn washing? No, I was getting victory royales in year 8, motherfucker. And if you thought having a poor uniform condition was the worst thing that can happen to you, you'd get debts for even lesser things. Showing up 2 minutes late to class, detention. Speaking without your hand raised, detention. Getting a question wrong, detention. Asking to go to the toilet during a lesson, detention. Seriously, even if you had something like ADHD, autism, or even Tourette's, they still wouldn't even make an exception for you. And that last one pisses me off the most because the teachers will always just say, oh, why didn't you go during lunch? Bro, I didn't need to go then. I can't just control when my bladder regularly needs to pee. And it's even worse for the women there because if they're going through their monthly cycle, then they're just going to have to put up with extreme pain and possible embarrassment from other students. And it's just not fair on them. But then again, I was too afraid to use the school toilets anyway. 1, I'm just one of those guys that's afraid of pooping in public places. 2, weird stuff would always be going on in that toilet. Whether it be fights or just chavs vaping, there'd always be something going on in there. I even heard that some schools don't have doors on their cubicles, so privacy just doesn't exist. Another phrase that really pisses me off was, the bell doesn't dismiss you, I do. Okay then, by that logic, the bell doesn't tell me that I should be here either. And since we're on the topic of teacher excuses, let's go over the different types of teachers that there were. Firstly, there was the teachers that just didn't give a fuck. They didn't care what they were teaching, they didn't care where they were, they didn't even care whether you passed or failed because they were just there for a paycheck. Then there was the teachers that just hated children with all their hearts. Like, if you really feel that way about us, why are you here? Do you just get off to watching us be tortured by you? Then there was the teacher that just tried too hard to be cool. Like, yeah, they'd let you get away with a few things, but at the end of the day, they're past our prime. Stop trying to be something that you're not. Then there was the teachers who could actually teach you stuff, but these people were like a rare 1 in a million find, so good luck with that. And then there was the one teacher, it's always just the one, that was just a full-blown pedophile. Like, they wouldn't even try to hide it. It'd be blatantly obvious and somehow they'd keep their jobs. And so the one who went to my school would always go into the girls' changing rooms whenever there was a PE lesson. And this guy was a science teacher. And he'd always invite himself onto the school trips where kids would stay abroad in some place just so he can make sure the kids are in bed. But the one thing that teachers all wanted to drill into our heads at that point was how important our GCSEs were. They'll try and just convince us that these GCSEs are the be-all and end-all of our lives, and if we fail even one, then we're screwed in the future. But I know people who have failed their exams and they're doing fine, and I've met people who've done their exams and they're doing awful. Now again, if you're not from the UK and you don't know what your GCSEs are, they're basically just our final exams. And no matter what, you'd always have to do English, maths, science, and or 3 or 4 other subjects of your choice. And since we're on that topic of GCSEs, let's go over the different lessons that we did. Let's start with English. I didn't really mind English, especially in the last year, but the only part that I really liked about it was the reading and writing your own stories part. But I just hated the fact that we just had to analyze stuff from it. So the books that I had to do was Macbeth, Jekyll and Hyde, and Inspector Calls. I think that might have just been me, but it feels like everyone had to do Inspector Calls for some reason. And the whole book is basically about this guy who cons a rich family into believing that they're responsible for some random girl's suicide. But I just hated the fact that we just had to write about what the writer's intention was at that point. We'd actually have to remember the quotes like they were on the back of our hands. For instance, if we were given a piece of text that just read, "The sky was blue, I'm eating a bowl of pasta," the teacher would just come out and say, "Okay, class, what does this mean?" It's a normal day outside? No, you fucking idiot! It symbolizes depression! I don't even think that the authors of those novels intended it to be looked at from that angle. I don't even think that Shakespeare knew half the things that he was saying. Like, look at this one. This is an actual quote from Macbeth. There was one book that I did really enjoy reading though during English, but I didn't do it for my GCSEs. This book was called Of Mice and Men. This tells the story about these 2 guys, George and Lenny, who go out to work on a ranch in America so they can one day buy their own ranch. With George being the level-headed smart one of the 2, and Lenny being the big, strong, I don't want to say the words of the group. Now, I've actually got a funny story to tell you about this book. So our teacher would have us read pages out loud to the book to the rest of the class. So she calls out my name and asks me to continue on reading the page. I continue to read it for everyone else, and then I just see the N-word. So I just stop reading it, I don't say a word, and then the teacher just looks up to me and she says, "Why did you just stop reading?" And then the whole room just goes silent. The teacher looks up and just says, "Why, is that a word you don't know?" And I'm just like, I know what the word is, I just don't want to say it. And then she just storms up to me and just goes to say, "Well, if you know what word it is, say it. Say it now. Read it for everyone to hear." And to make this even more awkward, I was sitting next to the one black kid in the classroom. And simply out of the fact that I said, no, I don't want to read it, I got sent out of the class and I was given a lunchtime detention. All because I didn't want to say that word. But I hated that teacher for whatever time I still had left there. Anyway, the book ends with this character, Curly. His wife starts flirting with Lenny, and she is a thought. She tries to seduce Lenny and have sex with him, but Lenny accidentally kills her in the process. And then Lenny realizes what he does and decides to run away, but the rest of the gang finds out what he's done and they all decide to try and hang him. But George doesn't want to kill him because Lenny's obviously not all that right in the head and he clearly didn't mean it. Unfortunately though, he knows what he has to do and that there's no going back for him. And this is where the sad part happens. George manages to find Lenny before the angry mob does and tries to comfort him during this time. George tells Lenny that they're going to leave that ranch and they're now going to start their own farm with tons and tons of animals. George tells Lenny, we're going to have cows, we're going to have pigs, we're going to have sheep, chicken. And then Lenny just asks George, what about the wabbits, George? Do I get to pet the wabbits? Tell me about them wabbits, George. And then George just pulls out a gun and blows Lenny's fucking head off. Yeah, that just happens on the last page of the book. It's a sad ending, and rest in peace, Lenny. The hood lost a real one. And I would be sad If it wasn't for that one kid who wrote on the first page, haha, George shoots Lenny. Anyway, I'm done talking about English now. Let's move on to maths. I hated maths as soon as I started secondary school. Because as soon as they started putting in letters and quadratics, they made something so simple, so stupid. And they treat it as if we'd use these subjects like every single day of our lives in the future. I don't think once after leaving school I have used like the quadratic formula or the Pythagorean theorem. Like, what was it again? Negative b minus the square root of b squared is something over 2a. Like, are you listening? It makes no fucking sense. Like, I'm sure that means something to someone, but to a guy like me, it means absolutely fuck all. And the questions they'd give out on tests would be even more stupid. It would be something like, little Jimmy has 6 apples. The train he's on has 64 wheels. Calculate the circumference of the sun. And then it'd always be followed up by follow what's equal to 0. Like, how can I find what's equal to 0? 0 is nothing. And then after like 15 minutes of calculation, you'll find out the answer's something like -3. But how could something be less than 0 if 0 is nothing? You're pulling numbers out of your arse. I honestly don't understand why we're taught this instead of how to pay our taxes. But then again, even if we were taught that, I still wouldn't do it. Oh, what was that?
FBI, open up!
Oh shit, FBI arrested! Right, let's talk some science. Science was a weird one for me because I thought we'd be getting to do tons of cool stuff in it. I expected us to be making fires and doing explosions like how they do in Mythbusters. But instead, we're taught how to calculate speed, gravity, and how heavy protons are. Isn't that what maths is for? Why are you teaching me this? I thought we'd be learning something important, like how to make crystal meth. But instead, I know that the reason why leaves are green is because of a thing called chlorophyll. Why the f*** do I need to know that? Like, I know how to dissect a frog, but for whatever reason, I don't know how to give my friend CPR. In what situation in my life am I ever going to need to dissect a frog? I even heard that if you decide to do any science subject for A-levels or uni, then pretty much every single thing that you learned in your GCSEs was either a half-truth or lies. So, what was the point in us learning this if that's not the case? If you want to learn this stuff to be a doctor, chemist, or a lab assistant, then I fully support that, but we shouldn't be showing these kids irrelevant facts like atomic structures. Because they're teaching that to kids as if they're going to be the next Oppenheimer. What, do you want nuclear Armageddon? I mean, at the end of the day, most of the stuff on the periodic table is just rocks anyway, so who cares? Anyway, I'm done talking about all the different subjects that there are. If I decide to make a follow-up to this, I'll talk about some more subjects and we can all shit on that together. But now let's talk about assemblies. We'd always be pulled out of our form rooms during first period for assemblies, as if it's not 8:30 in the morning and we're still half asleep. And it'd always start with either the head of year or the head teacher calling out saying, good morning, year 10. I said good morning, year 10.
Shut the fuck up!
And the assemblies themselves were always hit or miss. It's always updates on what's been changing or if there's something new, telling us off about how appalling our behaviour is, or getting some random guest speaker crying about his life story as if we know or care. The guest speaker ones were always the most annoying, because all of their stories went something like, I was in Clapham. I had to sell drugs on the street corner. I was in prison for 5 years, all because I didn't pass my GCSEs. Yeah, those assemblies were always miserable. But if it featured student performances or guest speakers like Pink Panthers, then they were pretty good. I do remember my final ever assembly though, which happened right after my final GCSE paper. Basically, my head of year just said, look, well done for completing your exams, but in all honesty, we now all want you out this building and to never to see you again. We hate each and every single one of you. We don't want to know you in your future or if you got a job or if you're enjoying uni, because we don't care. Get the fuck out, you hormonal pieces of shit. We're serious. Don't even bother saying goodbye to your teachers or your friends. Okay, so it wasn't those exact words, but it was along those lines. And I still don't know why people chose to carry on with their A-levels there. But then came your final day of year 11, where it's the last time you walk through those doors and you say goodbye to all of your peers. You'll most likely sit that final exam, get that last assembly, maybe even get a Domino's if you're lucky, pictures with your classmates, signing shirts and so on. Girls would always come up to you, most likely pretending to cry their eyes out, saying, oh, you were so sweet, you were my favourite person here, I'm gonna miss you so much. Whereas the guys, on the other hand, will draw a giant cock on you or a swastika. And then there comes the prom. Was your school fortunate enough to have a prom? I almost wasn't. results. So about 3-4 days after I left school, our parents get an email from our head of years telling us that we had to cancel our prom due to COVID restrictions. Despite the fact that it was summer 2021 and we no longer had to wear masks and we could go abroad now. But thanks to some help from the years below, we found out that they actually cancelled it due to the fact that we didn't deserve one. But thanks to the help of some of the mums, we all got ourselves a prom sorted for everyone. The teachers, of course, tried to boycott it, but failed miserably. But as cool as it was that the mums got a prom done for us, that meant it became one of those standard white people parties. You know, the ones that sell cold sausage rolls, sandwiches, and everyone runs to the dance floor when someone plays Cha-Cha Slide or the Macarena. I, unfortunately, didn't have a date to the prom, mainly because I was a bitchless, ruthless loser who scared the hoes just by breathing. But I still had a fun time regardless. Then finally came results day, the day that students looked forward to the most, as they would find out the scores that will determine their higher educations, universities, and future jobs. This obviously would give a lot of people anxieties of whether they passed or they failed, and you'd actually see people jumping and crying over what they got. I got mine sent to my house, my mum pulled out her camera to see my reaction, to see what I did, and well, I passed. I passed everything, but I had literally no reaction. I was literally just like, okay, cool. I passed everything. I mean, I did do average. I wasn't expecting 9s and 8s. I was just getting 4s, 5s, and 6s, which I'm completely fine with. So what happened after that? I joined a really shit college, wasted 2 years of my life there, and now I'm at uni. But that's a story for another time. Anyway, that's me done for this video today. I might make a follow-up to this video going over more stories from secondary school, or even make a video about sixth form or college. So if you want me to do either of those, please let me know by leaving a like, comment, subscribe, and sharing with your friends and family. Also, it's June, so happy Pride Month, happy Men's Mental Health Month. If it's your birthday, happy birthday, you get a birthday smooch from me. Thank you for watching, and in conclusion, history was better than geography. If you think otherwise, I'ma beat your ass. I don't wanna go to school, I just wanna break the rules. Boys and girls across the world, putting on their dancing shoes, going to the discotheque, get